But thank you very much for inviting us all here today. My name is Leah Nichols, and I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for Sustainable Earth at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. And I'm delighted to welcome you all to this session titled Leading by Example and Scaling What Works, Research Institution Accelerators to Environmental Action. As you know, and as we discussed yesterday, we all need to take urgent action to address climate change. Science is telling us that we need to curtail global carbon emissions by 2030 in order to prevent the most catastrophic effects of climate change. And faculty and students at universities around the world are calling on their institutions to lead the transformations necessary to achieve sustainability, starting with their home institutions and scaling up. The faculty at Mason have loudly stated that they want to practice what they teach. They want to work in a sustainable institution and live in a sustainable region. And they would like to be engaged and involved in bringing about the necessary changes. So they created my institute to build the partnerships needed to achieve these goals. Many universities and research institutions are forging the way with initiatives to address sustainability in campus management and to create cultures of sustainability within their communities. Our panelists today are all leaders in this space and will describe how they are working to advance sustainability in higher education and how they are scaling these efforts. However, before I introduce the first speaker, I would like to comment very briefly on how universities, in doing the work of transforming themselves, are ideally situated to experiment with strategies to accelerate the use of science in decision-making, because knowledge producers and users are co-located within the same institution. Even with this significant advantage, the work necessary to transform scientific understanding into actionable knowledge and solutions is still substantial. However, as universities do this work internally, connecting their science to their practice and reflect on this work, academia can bring insight to bear on how we can accelerate the transformation of scientific understanding into actionable knowledge and solutions in other sectors as well. So now let me introduce our first speaker. Thierry Doré is the Vice President for Research and Innovation at the Paris Saclay University. He has spent his research and education career working on innovative cropping systems in temperate and tropical countries. So I'll turn it over to him for his opening remarks. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks a lot. So I am Thierry, Vice President for Research and Innovation at Université Paris-Saclay in France, near Paris. So to introduce the university, Université Paris-Saclay is a very young university. It has been launched officially about 1.5 years ago, and it gathered a group of university components and engineering schools. And the aim is a common education and research project. It's relatively new in France to gather higher schools in engineering and university. So it's a young university, even if the roots of the Université Paris-Saclay are Université Paris-Sud, which was founded in 1971, if I remember well. So Université Paris-Saclay represents now 13% of France's research potential. The university shares 275 laboratories, and it is nested in a protected natural area and also agricultural area in the south of Paris. And it's at the heart of a very dynamic economic hub. We have around 50,000 students, 8,000 researchers and lecturers, and about 10,000 technical and administrative staff. And Université Paris-Saclay is really a driving force for the development of the local area. And it is also one of France's leading institutions. Maybe you have heard of it in the Harvey ranking, in the Shanghai ranking. So the university has chosen in its statute, so it's very important for us to take into account the challenges of the ecological transition to sustainable development. So as a consequence, the president of the university decided to hire a vice president for sustainable development, which is a very symbolic feature. And the ambition of the university is to make sustainable development issues cross-cutting with the university and to inspire beyond the university in the territory and in the country. This is achieved by supporting research and innovation in all areas related to sustainable development, also by training citizens and professionals in these topics, by developing virtuous practices for the environment and quality of life at the university, and also by developing new teaching methods through awareness of sustainable development. The credo, the ground that guides our global approach is that our societies and the economics are only developed, that our societies and the economies can only develop sustainably and guarantee social equity by respecting the principle of planetary limits and the non-substitutability of resources from the biosphere. So it's very important for us. It's a ground on which everything is funded in the university regarding the sustainable transition. As we are a young university, in order to prioritize the actions to undertake, we started with a collaborative approach. It was taken last year to involve students and staff in the development of projects. So 59 ideas emerged from this collaborative process, and 14 are currently being studied within working groups among which are administrative staff, researchers, technicians, and the students. So we have a series of different actions. I won't go into details of these different actions. Maybe some points on the campus life. So in the campus life, we have different actions such as the design of transportation that favors soft mobility, the development of green and natural spaces, the thinking about waste management, treatment and limitation of waste management, the decarbonization of the campus, the integration of an ecological dimension in the new constructions. There are a lot of new buildings on our campus, maybe for the last decade. And also more responsible meals proposed to the staff and to the student. And so I won't go into much detail now. Regarding the academic issues, University Paris-Saclay intends to position itself as an experimental research training campus for the socio-ecological transition. So it addresses priorities, societal challenges like health and well-being, energy, climate, environment, biodiversity, agriculture, and so on, both in research and training. So we have dedicated interdisciplinary curricula. We have dedicated research teams and projects, and we benefit from the presence in the university of experts who are widely involved in the IPCC or IPBES reports. But along with the training of specialists in these areas, we believe that the issue of socio-ecological transition must be integrated into all university curricula. In this respect, among others, we participate and adhere to the so-called Grenoble Agreement, resulting from the COP2 étudiante, whose approach will be presented by its president just after me. And in this respect, we are currently in the process of mobilizing the important work done in the framework by COP2 to build our action plan from the charter of COP2. So I will stop here. Maybe I've been too long. So I give you the back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next speaker, and we'll save questions through the end. I do encourage audience members to put questions in the Q&A box so that we can address them when we get to the end of the opening statements and after the moderated section. We'll next hear from Helene Dillard. She is the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences at the University of California, Davis. Dillard has extensive national and international leadership experience, including invited consultations, presentations, and scientific exchanges. So Helen, please take it away.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. It's really a pleasure. It's good morning here in California, and I think it's a little later in France. UC Davis is a very interesting university in that it's quite large in size, around 39,000 total students, and about 5,300 acres, and I forgot to put that in hectares. but it's a quite large institution, and yet it is very, very focused on sustainability. In the 11th annual Green Metric rankings, UC Davis is acknowledged for the 5th year in a row as #1 in most sustainable university in the United States. And so they're really excited about that ranking. They also got a very high gold certification under STARS, the Sustainability Tracking, Assessment, and Rating System, from the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Ed. And what they've done is, over the years, they now have 45 buildings with LEED certification, and that is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It's a globally recognized system symbol of sustainability. They've also got more than 60% of our departments have sustainability related courses that they're now teaching. They have a plan on the campus to transition all the landscaping on the campus to plants that can that are better suited to withstand the effects of climate change. Because as you know, California is a really dry place. They're also using a lot of recycled water on campus, and they estimate that it's saving more than 17 million gallons of potable water annually. As I said before, we're a dry state. We're already in a drought, and so they have been trying to conserve water, and they have looked at their statistics over the years, and currently we're using about 70% less water per person than we did in 1969, and we had fewer people on campus then. So they've achieved an overall 31% overall reduction in water use on campus from their 2008 levels of water use. So they're really getting efficient, really getting good at it, and yet it's still a beautifully landscaped campus. Other investments that the campus made that really stimulated from pressure from students and also from research from the faculty. And one of those was a chancellor really invested heavily in solar power. So we have a 16.3 megawatt solar power plant, and it generates around 33 million kilowatt hours for the campus. And it reduces the greenhouse gas emissions by about 14,000 metric tons. So that's been a really big investment that they're very, very proud of. In addition to that solar powered plant, many of our buildings and our parking lot shaded structures have solar panels on them, which also generate energy. And many of the faculty have special greenhouses with solar panels that generate whatever it is that they need for those greenhouses. The Davis campus is converting its entire fleet of buses that serve the campus and the city of Davis to electric buses. And most of the current fleet runs on compressed natural gas. And so as each of these buses reaches retirement age, they're replacing them with quiet, emission-free battery electric vehicles. They also, we have two campuses. There's the main UC Davis campus, and then just a few minutes away, there is a health center campus where there's a hospital, and they've converted all of those buses that take students and faculty to and from the main campus to the hospital to electric buses, which was a really big deal. And they did that during the pandemic. I think those of you that have come to UC Davis, you'll notice that the locals use bicycles. We have 22,000 bikes registered on campus, and many people use them instead of cars for transportation to and from campus and around town. And I will say that the university and the city have worked together to make it a really walk and bike friendly place. So you really don't need a car. They're changing the way we heat our buildings. It's always been with steam that boils water using natural gas. And this summer, during the pandemic, they are changing it all to low temperature hot water that uses electricity from the solar panels to heat the water. So this is going to be a big project. There's lots of construction right now, and it's a very significant investment in our infrastructure. The goal is to save water as well as energy and reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, and ultimately put our campus on a path for electrification and decarbonization. They also did a lot of renovations and retrofitting during the pandemic to keep the cold air out in the winter, and that really made a big difference as well. To sort of stimulate people generally to think about it, they have a green workplace program, and it offers individuals, labs, and offices certification for their sustainable practices. And so a lot of people have converted their labs to certified sustainable labs, and it makes them eligible for discounted materials and other resources. So it's kind of a carrot to get people to do more in their local workplace. There's also a component of social sustainability. We have a student-led project called the Food Recovery Network. What it does is it retrieves surplus food from campus markets and dining facilities, and then delivers it to student pantries as well as local charities and pantries. They essentially divert tens of thousands of pounds of food from going into landfills each year and using it to provide nutrition for families and students in need. And then this year, we're conducting a voluntary university review, which is due out in September. And that's going to be really one of the ways that aligns our efforts with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Our labs, classes, greenhouses are all in play on the sustainability. There's an estimate that there's about 6,000 courses on campus in various aspects of sustainability, from landscape design to smart energy to sustainable agriculture. And these all provide sustainability related co-curricular experiences and internships where the students can develop the skills and connections needed to make a positive difference in the world. And I'll stop there, and maybe later, if there's time, I'll go into some very specific things that are happening in our College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences.
Fantastic, thank you so much. We'll move to our next speaker, who will be Chris Boone, who is the Dean of the Futures College at Arizona State University. His research contributes to ongoing debates in sustainable urbanization, environmental justice, vulnerability, and global environmental change. So Chris, thank you.
Thank you, Leah, and good morning. I happen to be in California right now, hence maybe the painting you see behind me, on vacation in Encinitas, where it's a little bit cooler now than it is in Phoenix. So it's a great pleasure to be here. There's a lot of things going on, and I hesitate to know where to start. The Arizona State University, where I'm Dean of the College of Global Features, has long been a leader in sustainability. Much of it is owed to leadership. So our president, who's been with us for more than 20 years, Michael Crow, helped to found the Earth Institute at Columbia University. And when he came to ASU, he insisted that sustainability would be foundational to who we are and how we function and how we operate. And it's had the intended effect. So he was the first co-chair of the presidential commitment to climate change. We were able last year to meet our carbon neutrality goal 6 years ahead of schedule. We're #1 in the US for the Times Higher Education Sustainable Impact, ASHE Stars Platinum, the list goes on and on. And I think the reason why it's happened, so in addition to that leadership, we've also been committed culturally at the university to the notion idea that universities have to play a leading role. One of the stories that I often remember, this is in the early years, a reporter from the New York Times came out to interview our president and said, why are universities putting all this work into focusing on climate change, other sustainability initiatives, when they represent such a small portion of the population? What kind of impact can they really have? And he said, well, we might only represent a fraction of the population, but universities represent 100% of the future leaders. And that's always stuck with me. So our ability to impact, in our case, a very large student population, 125,000 students attend the university. I know that as with each year when they graduate and go out into the world, that their potential for impact is lifelong. So we have a lifelong commitment at the university, but we're also producing legions of lifelong thinkers who will go out and affect change. So I won't go through all of the metrics of the university. I'm happy to point people to the main webpage where you can see that. I want to talk about some other things that may be a little unusual. Now, let me start with an organization that we created in partnership with the University of Arkansas about 15 years ago called the Sustainability Consortium. So the Sustainability Consortium is a science-based approach to improving the transparency of supply chains for retail companies. And at the moment, it affects about $1 trillion of retail trade. And what this does is, using the best science that's done at our own university and other universities, we're able to inform companies about the nature of the sustainability of their supply chains, whether it's around water, whether it's around fair trade, whether it's around energy use, so that when retailers are deciding where they're going to purchase materials from the supply chain, they can use this as a mechanism to meet their own sustainability goals. The other thing you might imagine is that this is also driving significant change. So one of the largest retailers, Walmart, has been a partner in the Sustainability Consortium from the very beginning. And when they make a decision on something to do with supply chain, you can probably guess what happens, right? The suppliers stand up, take notice, and they change the way that they do things. Another entity within the university that I'm particularly proud of, especially for its local and increasingly statewide impact, is something called the Sustainable Cities Network. And this was established about a decade ago, and it brought together sustainability experts in the greater Phoenix area. And originally, this was more like a therapy group and a support group. So these were lone voices inside of municipalities that didn't really understand what sustainability was. But over time, they become a positive force to be reckoned with. And so in addition to exchanging best ideas, creating task forces around things like, how do you avoid heat-related deaths in the summer, which are a problem here in Arizona, they've also been able to band together to do things like purchasing. So instead of purchasing, small cities purchasing materials on their own or services, they can come together and in essence buy in bulk, and then be able to do the sustainable thing rather than the least expensive thing with the limited budgets that they have. Out of the Sustainable Cities Network, this is the last thing I'll say, one thing that it created here on campus was linking up cities with their sets of priorities around sustainability and tying it into courses that are offered at the university. And in essence, we've been able to mobilize thousands of students to work on community priorities that have a sustainability focus. It gives the municipalities a chance to understand more about the university, and it gives our own students real world authentic learning opportunities, which I think are fundamental to inspiring those students to go out and change the world. With Leah, I'll hand it back to you.
Fantastic, thank you. Our final speaker this morning is Frdric Vince, who is the president of COP2 Étudiant, or in English, Second Student Conference of Parties, an association that works on the ecological transition of French higher education. He also studies energy systems and energy economics at the Grenoble Institute of Technology in France. Frdric.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you for the invitation, and well, good afternoon from France. So yes, I'm president of the COP2 Étudiant, which is a French student organization that works on supporting the French higher education institutions in their socio-ecological transition. Our organization was born from several observations, and the first one is the urge to address the environmental crisis, as it was recalled at the beginning of this panel. And there was also this necessity to train students in socio-ecological issues in order to build a sustainable world and a sustainable future. As Christopher just said, the students of higher education are the future policymakers and the deciders. So it seemed to us very important that they are aware of what's at stake with the ecological transition. So we took this key role of higher education institutions in this task of training students, and we we saw that in several French institutions, there was often a lack of discussions between all stakeholders, so students, teachers and researchers and staff of the universities. So a lack of discussion on these teams between all the stakeholders, and this often created frustration from all sides and could prevent going further in the ecological transition of these institutions. So our goal was to address the socio-ecological transition of higher education institution by including all these stakeholders in the discussion, and hence the name of Conference of Parties, which come from the International Conference of Parties, where several countries gather around the same table and discuss about what measures they can take about ecological transition. So in order to do so, we created during this academic year, 2020-2021, in about 70 institutions, whether they were universities, business schools, engineering schools, etc. We created work groups, so about 15 people per group, work groups with 1/3 of students, 1/3 of teachers and researchers, and 1/3 of the institution's administrations. It was very important to us that all parties, all stakeholders would be involved in the discussion. And we had these work groups work on socio-ecological themes, such as how to form students to the environmental crisis, for example, and how to give them the keys to face it, whether it is in their personal life or in their professional life, in their jobs. How to turn also institutions or research laboratories and campuses into sustainable places that would be compatible with planetary boundaries, for instance, how to help them reduce their footprint, how to address social inequalities, etc., etc. So we took socio-ecological themes that are well, the same themes as the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals from the UNO. And we asked the work groups to identify the measures already in place in their institution to address these themes, what was already done to make the socio-ecological transition of their institution better, and to think about the new measures they could put in place to push their transition even further. And this was very interesting to see the work groups functioning, and to see that students, teachers and researchers and staff often had divergent points of views, but that could be could come to an agreement and think of the best solutions together. And from the work of all these groups during the academic year, we created 2 documents which were published in April 2021. The first one is the Grenoble Agreement that was named so in reference to the Paris Agreement of the 21st COP, and was named after the French city where the COP2 Étudiante was born, Grenoble. And this Grenoble Agreement sets 11 objectives of socio-ecological transition for higher education institutions. So objectives about training the students to these themes, about reducing the footprint, etc. So the same themes that I already talked about. And this Paris Grenoble Agreement was signed by well, multiple institutions we had worked with, and also institutions we had not worked with, but which were interested in signing the agreement and were working on respecting its objectives. And the second document we could produce was a white paper that summarizes all the measures proposed by the work groups, and which goal is to give keys to the institutions to address this socio-ecological transition. Because what we observed was that there was a goodwill from all stakeholders, so administration, students, researchers, etc. There was this goodwill to go further together, but often the institutions would maybe not know how to proceed, where to start, etc. And the idea of this white paper is to show all what has been done and will be done in the higher education and research world in France, and give ideas to other institutions. And so, yes, with our association, we support using collective intelligence to go further on these themes. So to work all together, not only students on the side and staff on another side and researcher on the third side, but to include everyone on the discussion and to work with collective intelligence. And we could observe this year that working so allows to go much further and much faster on these themes.
Thank you. I will remind the audience to please put questions in the Q&A so we can address them shortly. But I wanted to start with a couple of questions of my own. All of you mentioned or discussed ways in which you're sort of experimenting with these transformations within the context of your own university and utilizing your institution as a living lab, and or experimenting in other ways to bring about these transformations to sustainability. And I really wanted to ask, sort of as I alluded to in my opening remarks, how are you connecting the research and the curriculum of your university to bring to bear onto these transformations, and to take advantage of the transformations to spur research, new research and novel curriculum? So I'll throw that out to all of you, and please feel free to jump in. Anyone you want to start out with that?
I'll give it a crack at it. So I think what I've seen is that the university is trying to find partners in the private sector as well as in the communities. And so the example I'll use for Davis is that the city planner and the campus planner work very closely together to look at placement of solar, to look at how it's going to be used, what are any effects on birds or wildlife, et cetera, so that they have a common understanding of what each other is trying to do. And it seems to avoid a lot of conflict. For a while, the campus was growing, accepting more students because we have the land. And the city was saying, look, there's not enough housing. We have to grow together. And so now they're working more together on everything, on water issues, sewage issues, housing issues, et cetera. And so I think it really takes that town gown or campus to city to make things happen. I think another example, which is more about human sustainability, was during the pandemic, the campus used their researchers from my college who do a lot of genetic engineering, as well as the people in the medical school, to develop a saliva test that they could use on campus to detect coronavirus in anybody that would do the test. And it was really, really good at getting asymptomatic people and finding out that they actually had that they were carrying the virus. And so then they decided, let's work with the city. The city bought more equipment. We put our expertise to use. And now the whole community can get tested for free. So it's, again, one of those things where you have to have that relationship. And I think that's the key to all of this. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to say anything about living labs in your space?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So one of the things that we're working on now with Klaus Lochner, who is considered to be the grandfather of carbon capture, we have created working with a company based in Ireland, a carbon capture technology that we're about to scale. And the argument that's interesting, so we have lots of students that are engaged in not just the technology itself, but thinking through what kind of policy sets and what kind of economic instruments do you need to put in place to actually make this work. But one of the fascinating things about it is it's demonstrated the importance of thinking on global scales, because we all share the same atmosphere, right? And this particular technology works extremely well in low humidity environments. And if there's one thing that we've got a lot of, it's low humidity. environments. But the credits for the carbon capture are actually going to be taken by the Irish government, which also produces a lot of dairy cattle and associated methane and of CO2 equivalents. So one of the reasons I like that is the name of my college is the College of Global Futures, and my primary goal for every student that leaves that college is that they leave with a global mindset, recognizing that you might be doing things locally, but you need to understand the global systems that you're part of, because that sets constraints, but also sets opportunity sets. So being able to engage students to think on those kinds of scales, I mean, to what Florent was talking about and Thierry as well, I think this is a really important responsibility that we have at universities.
Thank you. Florent and Thierry, I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond as well if you'd like, or we can move to the next question. Okay.
I can say something about Université Paris-Saclay. We have a formal living lab with some farmers and cities around the different campuses, not so far with private companies, but with farmers and cities. So we are building some programs in order to enhance the performances of the cities and of the farmers using the results of research and using also the workforce of the students. So the students are very committed in this sort of program. And it's not so easy to decide to make the cities also committed. So the students are really pushing because they are living on the campus and they want to change, and they are very interested in natural areas and in agriculture and so on. They want to change. The farmers also want to change because they think that they need to move to another agriculture. But it's more difficult for the cities because they also have some citizens who doesn't want so much to change. And it's easier with the students. It's not so easy with the cities. It's easy with the associations, and it's difficult with the private companies. So there is a gradient of easiness in order to build this living lab.
Excellent, thank you. I wanted to highlight, equity and justice and social sustainability are essential components of sustainability. And I heard flavors of them through this sort of touching on equity and justice throughout all of your opening remarks. But I wanted to ask you to say a bit more about that. How are you incorporating issues of equity and justice as you're achieving these sustainability transformations within your own institutions? I'll throw it out there again, Chris.
I'm happy to jump in. I don't like adjectives to sustainability, social sustainability, environmental sustainability. Sustainability is about the integration of socio-ecological technical systems founded on notions of justice. If you eliminate justice, it's not sustainability to my mind, it's something else. So how are we doing that? Well, one thing that I'm really proud of started with the students. About 5 years ago, a group of students said that we needed to be thinking differently about how we acquire goods at the university. So they created a fair trade movement on campus, and I'm happy to report that in 2018, we became the largest fair trade university in the United States. So that was a great example of where students are recognizing that sustainability is bounded in notions of justice for future generations, but it's also bounded in notions for present generations, what we call intra and intergenerational equity or justice. And environmental justice, which is my own field, I think is an integral part of sustainability as well. So if you have sustainability for the few that results in burdens for the many, then again, that's not sustainability. That's just a redistribution of environmental benefits to the privileged few, burdening the unprivileged majority. So it's essential to the notion idea of what sustainability is, and students get that. You don't have to teach them that, they understand it, and it's what motivates a lot of them.
Thank you. Florent, I think I saw you on mute a second ago. Would you like to add?
Yes, indeed, I completely agree with Christopher. I think it's really important to consider sustainability not just on the from the ecological point of view, but to see that a globality that includes ecology, of course, but also all what's social issues. And at the COP2 Étudiante, we added a theme about social inequalities and how to deal with all social problems on campuses. And this was we often had surprised reaction from the staff of the universities who asked us, well, I don't see the link with sustainability and ecology. So I think there's a work to do on making clear that social inequalities and environmental issues are linked to build a sustainable university. And although there was this surprised reactions from the universities, at the end, all the universities worked on this aspect as well as on the others, and were able to come out with solutions about including everyone and guaranteeing equality and equal access to learning, for instance, on their campuses. So I think there's progress being made on this subject in the higher education institutions, but we must not give up the fact that social justice is very deeply linked to the sustainability.
Excellent. Helene or Thierry, any comments?
I would say that for us, the students have been a big driver on social justice and environmental justice across the campus in many different ways. And they're really diving into the big questions that are hard to answer. So for example, as water becomes short in the state, there are the haves and the have-nots. And what we see in the Valley is that some of our lower income individuals live where they're totally dependent on groundwater, but nobody has a well deep enough to reach it because it's fallen so far. And so those are the very people with the least money that have to drive somewhere to go get water. And if they were to be able to pump it, they don't have the filtration that they need to clean up the pesticides and other things that are in the water. So the students have really been pushing the state agencies to really get on that, as well as working with faculty to help come up with some answers and responses to help with that issue. But it's time and time again, so many of the environmental issues really come down to the haves are okay, the have-nots are living in the worst locations. And again, it's a big social issue. It's beyond the university, but we do contribute to some of the discussion and responses to it. I would say on the other one where the students have had a tremendous impact has been with food security, food waste, and how to redistribute food. And I would say that they really just took the ball and went with it. And the university now helps them with some resources so that they can do a better job. But again, and the students, when the university said, well, we'll give you some vehicles, they said, we want electric vehicles. And I thought that was great. You know, they were just like, yeah, don't give us the old, you know, diesel truck. We want electric vehicles. And so now you see their vehicles going around to different locations, delivering food that didn't get consumed at the dorms or the dining halls, etc. So it's really been student activism that has made a huge difference, I think.
Fantastic. Thierry, did you want to add?
Just briefly, I completely agree with Chris and Florent. I agree with the direction, and the sustainable development goals are not only environmental goals, of course, but we also must assume that some goals are conflicting, and we have to find, in some cases, in some local places, compromises between the different goals, because we can not be at the top for the different goals, and so we have to find these compromises. And it's important to say to people that it's not possible to be at the top for all the goals. And we have to choose in different situations which goal we are putting in priority, considering the local situation. For example, the question of water won't be a problem in another area than California. And so the position of this problem won't be at the same level.
Thank you. Another question is, many of you mentioned the inclusion of many voices in doing this work, having faculty, students, staff, partners, stakeholders, etc., coming to the table, having dialogues to find solutions. And I wanted to ask you about what processes you found to be most effective for surfacing implementable solutions in that space. So that you're bringing all of the diversity of points of view together and surfacing something that's doable, rather than producing fractured chaos. Start there.
Well, Leah, I'd say you almost answered your own question in the way that you posed it. So the idea that you start with multiple stakeholders, I think is fundamental. I think we've all been in situations where, you know, the old academic model where we work away in our labs and we produce these, what we think are amazing results, and then go hand them. We call this the UPS model, right? You go deliver it and you hope that the policymakers unwrap the package and figure out what's inside and implement exactly what you say. That rarely works. So the notion and idea of bringing together people who actually have decision-making authority, who can help with the creation of the research questions in the first place, that they're vested in it, that they have already in essence vetted what is important to them, that this is most likely going to be the easiest ones to implement. This is not to say this is the only model, because sometimes, say if you're working with the municipality or company, they may not have the long-term view. So I think universities still play a really important role with basic research. But you need, I think, to balance that responsibility for the creation of knowledge with also finding those deeply and early engaged ways of working with stakeholders to create those kinds of solutions-oriented situations.
Thank you. I was trying to dig down a bit into the processes of doing that, rather than just saying we're bringing them all to the table. You know, what are the pitfalls? How do you structure these sorts of conversations or these sorts of engagement? Is it long-term engagement? Is it light touch? How do you? What are the pitfalls? What do you want to be paying attention to in order to replicate similar sorts of processes elsewhere?
How long is today's session? Hours long.
Briefly.
Right. Oh, I'll just have one method that I think works really well, and that's engaging with really effective boundary partners or boundary spanners. Those institutions, nonprofit organizations that have already got the trust of communities rather than scientists just going in. Those kinds of situations I found to be one way to be really effective at making that happen.
At Université Paris-Saclay, we have set up a Sustainable Development Assembly with the cities. So we share with the cities our own problems. They give their own problems, and we try to find mixed solution and to decide, like Chris said, which are the research questions which are arising for just now and for the future. And we try to take into consideration their own perception. So this Sustainable Development Assembly, I hope it will be a good instrument to go further with the cities and with the citizens.
Thank you. Florent, did you want to add anything in this space?
Yes, there might be several pitfalls. One of them, but you have to ensure that all stakeholders join the table, being willing to negotiate or to progress together, and to not just to defend their point of view and not give up anything on it, but just being ready and able to hear what another stakeholder with maybe divergent interests has to say, and which compromise you can find in order the benefit is maximal to the university, for instance. And this might not be easy to do at the beginning, but if all stakeholders come to join the discussion in this mindset, then it will be much easier to progress together and to find the best solution satisfying all stakeholders. This is the main pitfall to me. The stakeholders might have very divergent opinion on some points, and you have just to ensure that the debate will be quiet and will make it progress, and not just two stakeholders just staying on their position and not going further.
Excellent, thank you. Helen, anything, or shall we go to the next? Some audience questions now.
We can go to audience questions. I was just going to add that I've been in those chaotic meetings where every proposal had somebody against it. You know, something was wrong with solar, something was wrong with wind, something was wrong with nuclear. It's crazy. And so I think what we ended up doing was having the insanity meeting at the beginning, and then start paring down who the partners are that are willing to come together and agree on something. And to my surprise, solar got agreed upon very easily in this region. Wind was out of the question. Hydro was out of the question. So it was just, but once we could agree on solar, we thought, hurry up and build it. So we did.
Fantastic. A question that's come in from the audience that I wanted to surface is, this idea of 100% of future leaders really resonates, especially considering the parallels between 1919 and now, and what the future potentially holds. Can panelists speak to the role of universities in preparing for a future that we don't even know? How does this play out at a strategic level?
I hate to be the first person who's always answering the questions, but I'll start. I can't stand the silence. So I think what's really important is we need to be creating leaders that have adaptive capacity. That's really, really important. So I think, you know, we've all heard the expressions, what we're teaching today may not be relevant 10 years from now, right? So the old knowledge-based approach to learning, that's part of it, but it's I think an increasingly small portion of what's necessary to create future leaders. It's about creating mindsets. It's about creating adaptive learners. I would also say that it's the justice component that we talked about, I think, is going to be really important if we're going to get this world right. So we need to be thinking beyond ourselves. We need to be thinking about future generations and others around the world, because we're all in this together. So I think it's a way of thinking, creating people that have that way of thinking, that are open to new ideas, that I think is going to be really critical.
And I would add critical thinking.
Florent, Helen?
Yeah, I agree with that. Critical thinking is very important. It's not just about learning facts, although it's also very important to know what climate change is, for instance, to address it. So there is also this part of knowing what's at stake with the ecological crisis. But it's most of all a mindset. It's thinking first about a solution in a sustainable way, and not looking absolutely for profit, for instance. So these are a set of reflexes that students have to gain, and if they develop this critical look on the world that surrounds them, if they are in this mindset of thinking first what's best for a sustainable world before anything else, then they will automatically be able to make the right decisions and to push the world to a sustainable solution. So this is I think that's really what's at stake here. From the students to have the good reflexes in their process of making choices and deciding.
Excellent, thank you. Another question that's come in is what kind of administrative pivoting was required during the pandemic, and how nimble were or are the universities in general in moving around resources to adapt to the pandemic in a sustainable way, or taking advantage potentially, I'm adding on here, but taking advantage of the changes and the disruption of the pandemic to advance sustainability on your campuses as well. Taking advantage is probably not the right words, but you understand what I mean.
I would say on our campus, we definitely took advantage of there not being people there. And so a lot of projects that probably would have taken, you know, a full year have only taken 6 months because there's nobody in the way. You didn't have to figure out where to move people, you closed the roads. I mean, they really tore the place apart. And what they did was they did a lot of upgrading on the air handling systems. I mentioned that they changed over from steam to hot water, and they changed all the piping. And again, those were all geared towards sustainability, towards reducing water use and energy use. I think the other thing that the campus took advantage of was the fact that with people working from home, we could actually free up some space. And there are people that don't want to return back to the workplace. And so now I see a lot of policies going towards flexible workplace, flexible hours, and it's going to free up some office space. And I think that the university will probably grow itself and fill in those offices with people who do want to come to campus. But I do see that for us, I just felt like they did a lot of the work that we wouldn't have seen till 2022, and it's done now. I think that's how we took advantage of it. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Anyone else want to, Thierry?
In our university, I'm not sure it's in the question, but during the pandemic uncovered some social difficulties, some social inequalities among the students. And it was very important for part of the staff, part of the citizens to discover that the students are not in very easy situation, in the common situation. And if there is something happening like the pandemic, it can be even worse. And the social problem, the equity started to take a better place in the agenda for some people. So maybe it's taking advantage of the pandemic. I don't know exactly, but it was really, really important in some places in France.
To Thierry's point, one of the things that became really apparent for us, I mean, it was always there. We have students that live on campus who can't live anywhere else. This is their home, they're foster kids. Right, and so people would say, let's shut down the university. We couldn't shut down the university. There was essential services that we had to provide. Second thing is the pandemic was a moment for universities to really stand up and show that they are there for the well-being and care of their communities. So similar to what Helene described for UC Davis, who created a saliva-based test, created free testing. We became the largest tester for the state of Arizona, was the university. And this is a way to demonstrate the immediate value of universities to look after and care for the communities that we serve. So to Thierry's point, it unveiled a lot of existing and deep inequalities, and hopefully we won't forget those and we'll find longer term ways to address them.
Excellent. Florent, anything? No worries. Okay. I was going to ask another question around the lines of something that I've actually encountered in my own work here at Mason as I've been engaging the campus operations. It sort of surfaced recently that Virginia has a cap on solar. It's a relatively low cap on how much solar we could potentially build on in any one place on our campuses. which raises the question of how do universities and or are universities engaging in the legislative or policymaking process to enable this, to help enable the sustainability solutions that you want to be engaging on your own campuses. I was wondering if any of you have been engaged in those sorts of processes, and to describe how the university as an institution can be a player in that space.
I have not engaged, but what I've seen the chancellor and the provost do is go to the state government with the requests, and basically pointing out policies that aren't working and then working with our faculty to come up with policies that will work. There was some opposition to our big solar farm that we built, but we put it on land that was not suitable for farming. It's very rocky and not all that great. And we set it up in such a way that we can graze sheep or goats underneath it. So it kind of took away all the arguments that people had, and it really became, will the state allow a public institution to do this? And the city was all for it. So that was another one where you bring your partners with you. And it got the okay with very little, very little anger and upset folks. It went through. And now other campuses are kind of looking at what we did and how we did it. So I think it's really a matter of those relationships and communicating and just being open. And they had a lot of town halls where people came and yelled and screamed about, solar's bad, and we just did it. And now it's kind of interesting. I'm sure you've heard stories about grids failing. And when the grid goes down, the campus doesn't go down. We're like one of the places that still has electricity. So it really kind of opened a lot of folks' eyes that having this in addition to access to the grid makes a big difference. And there's also questions in the Q&A. I don't know if you saw those, Leah.
Yes, I have a couple of those. Does anybody else want to talk about engaging in the legislative processes as a ways of enabling sustainability practices on your campuses? No? Okay. Another question that has come in is really asking around, do you think we'll achieve sustainability through technology or through change in our society and our consumption behaviors?
All of the above.
I think the technology is mostly there already. It's the question of behavioral change, quite frankly.
I agree with that. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. Technology has a role to play, that's certain, but we must not rely on it and think that technology will be the way out and will save us. That's, I think, an illusion. And even if it can help us, we have to question the way we work today as a university, as a society, and to question our habits and in order to make them more sustainable in the future. Technology will help, but will not be, in my opinion, the solution that will lead to a sustainable world.
Thank you. Thierry, you were saying?
I think we will need high-tech solutions, but we will need also low-tech solutions. And the changing in the behavior is very, very important. Maybe it's the most important thing now, but I think in some cases technology will be useful as well. So we don't have to put the technology in the rubbish. We have to take it into account, but very consciously and with keeping in mind the goal. The technology is not the goal. The goal is a sustainable development. So the problems arise when we take the technology as a goal and not as a mean. So if the goal is at the top, we can use or not use the technology.
Thank you. We're coming to the last few minutes of our hour, so I wanted to give you a minute or a few seconds actually to provide some closing remarks. And I might ask or prompt you to suggest, what's the one lesson that you've learned in doing the work on the initiatives that you've described, that if you were talking to somebody who wanted to scale your initiative and implement their initiative in their own space, what would you tell them? And then feel free to add any other concluding thoughts as you like, and we'll just go around the table. I'm thinking, Helen, can I put you on the spot?
I was hoping Chris would be first. Well, I think that the one thing I've seen is relationships and communication, very open and transparent, and go ahead and get the difficult conversations out the way early. And it seems to me that when we've done that, then we can kind of close in on a response or an answer or a solution that we would like to move forward with as a community. So early discussions, have the difficult, get it out the way. It's going to be an ugly meeting, go ahead and do it. And then slowly narrow through what you were trying to get done. And to me, that seems to be the answer. Oh, and the other thing that seemed to work was a little bit of carrots. We talk about carrots and sticks in the US, but having some sort of buy-in that rewards people for doing what they're doing. And it could be little stuff. I mean, I've seen people work really hard over a free lunch. And I mean, it's just a matter of recognizing that they have a role to play and that they're a part of the solution, and then that you provide some sort of recognition of their work.
Excellent.
I'll stop there.
I know we've just hit 10:50. Eric, if you don't mind going one like 30 seconds from each of you. Florent, would you like to say something?
The key to me is collective intelligence. In most of the working groups we set up, there was absolutely no expert on environmental change and climate crisis or whatsoever, but just discussing with and including all the thoughts that every person had to bring to the group. The work groups came up with incredibly just and efficient solutions, and this was really impressive to see. So I really think that communication, including all stakeholders and working with collective intelligence is the key to making the right solutions that are efficient and fast and yes, the best ones.
Thank you. Chris.
Persevere, and as Spike Lee said, do the right thing.
And Thierry.
We need a committed governing body, and we need to listen to the students.
Thank you, and thank you for being very brief. And thank you all for joining us. I really enjoyed this conversation.